like to. Good evening. We'll get started in a few minutes. We're just going to give people time to log in. And while we're waiting for people to log in, if you want to drop in the chat where you're joining us from, we always like to hear wherever we're coming from. Hopefully the chat feature works this time. Had a little tech error last webinar. All right, we're gonna get started. Welcome to Backbones, Women in SCI Health Talks. This program is funded by the Christopher and Dana Reeve Foundation. My name is Emily Lacey, and I'm the program coordinator. Today's webinar is being recorded and will be sent to everyone who registered via email and uploaded to our YouTube channel, where you can also find past recordings. If you are new to Backbones, our organization is committed to helping people with spinal cord injuries and similar disabilities find connection and community. I encourage you to check out our website at www.backbonesonline.com to find out more information about our program. We are a community-led program that seeks to bring awareness and education about women's health in the context of SCI. To continue to be community-led and directed, we will send an email tomorrow with a short survey as well as a copy of this webinar, which you may freely share. The link in the survey will be dropped. Oh my goodness. The link to the survey will be dropped in the chat. The survey is 5 questions and should only take a few minutes to complete. We thank you in advance for filling it out. In addition to this recorded webinar, we also have a private only for women with SCI small discussion groups to impact the conversation from tonight and share personal experiences and support. If you are interested in the small groups, please go to our website at oh my goodness, I cannot talk tonight. backbonesonline.com and click the program tab. I will introduce our amazing guest speakers here shortly. We will have a 10 to 15 minute Q&A at the end of the webinar. You are welcome to submit questions for our speakers through the Q&A option or send them directly to me in chat. I will read questions that are submitted. If at any point you would like Angeline or Barbara to clarify something, please raise your hand and submit your question in the chat. Without further ado, it is my pleasure to welcome Angeline and Barb. Angeline is a queer and multiple disabled undergrad studying sociology and anthropology and disability studies at RIT. She also works as an adaptive tech designer and consultant, a research assistant, and blogger. In her free time, she likes finding new accessible adventures with her fiancé and best friend. Barb sustained a T8 spinal cord injury from a motor vehicle accident in 2007. She started her advocacy journey when she won the title of Miss Wheelchair Pennsylvania 2018. She currently is a senior at William Patterson University of New Jersey studying disability studies. Thank you so much for being here this evening, and I will now hand the webinar over to Rebecca, our moderator for tonight.
Thank you, Emily. My name is Rebecca Torres. I am the founder and director of Backbones, and I'm really happy to be in conversation today with Angeline and Barb, 2 awesome, super accomplished people, and are just doing some really great things. And I think we're going to have a really good conversation on college life, your journey and process in getting to where you are now, and like your goals and stuff like that. I also went through a college experience, but many years ago. And so I'm sure we will find some similarities and differences to your experience. But I'd love to start first with you all introducing yourselves. Well, Emily gave your introduction, but if you want to talk a little bit more about yourselves, maybe some more information about your disability, your injury, if you're comfortable doing so, some hobbies or interests, what school you go to, your major, and all sorts of stuff like that. And I guess we'll start with Angeline, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. So hi everyone, my name is Angeline. You can also call me Angie. So currently I am a senior at RIT, which is Rochester Institute of Technology in Rochester, New York. I do a sociology and anthropology major, and I also do a self-designed disability studies major that I kind of created myself. I kind of take a lot of classes from different disciplines. I have spinal cord issues at my cervical spine, so my C5, C6, and I also have neurological disabilities and a lot of other chronic illnesses because yay, multiply disabled. A lot of the clubs I do and the things I do on campus are to kind of make things more accessible. So I've done things like peer facilitating, student government, orientation supervising, committee chair for facilities, parking and transportation. And just yesterday, I officially made the Disability Cultural Club at my school official with a bunch of other people helping me, of course. Yay. I also have founded my school's chapter of the Campus Access Network, and I'm sure other things that I can't currently remember. So I do a lot of things because my hobbies are yelling at able-bodied people to help me make things more accessible, as I'm sure a lot of people can relate to. Let's see. Anything else? I really like doing like random things in my community. So most recently I've tried sled hockey, which is super difficult. It's like ice hockey, but you're sitting and there's lots of sharp objects and people are really fast. And also adaptive rock climbing, which is super difficult, super fun, very scary. But those are the type of things I do in my free time and my school stuff. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, how about you, Barb? Can you tell us a little bit about you?
Yeah, of course. So I have a T8 spinal cord injury that I sustained in a motor vehicle accident. And it's an incomplete injury. It's called an anterior cord syndrome spinal cord injury. But I pretty much mimic a complete injury. What makes it different is I have something called proprioception, which isn't really helpful when you're not walking ambulatory. So it's kind of like, okay. So that is, the specifics about my injury. And as she stated, I, won the title of Miss Wheelchair Pennsylvania. So after my accident, my mom died not even a year later. And not even a year after that, my fiance at the time and I broke up. So I kind of went through a lot of things at the age of 21, 22, 23. I went through a very dark period of depression, and for like a decade, I just stayed there. So really, I kind of kept to myself for the majority of my spinal cord injury, and it was winning Miss Wheelchair Pennsylvania that really opened up my world. And I never talked to another person really in a wheelchair until I competed for the title of Miss Wheelchair Pennsylvania. I was completely out of my, space of comfort, but it forced me to really learn more and get involved with the community. And it is something that I'm very grateful for, that opportunity, and it really gave me direction in life. And so I never thought I'd go back to school. That was never something I thought I was going to do. And I ended up deciding to go back to school at William Patterson University. And I ended up deciding to major in disability studies. And I'm doing it remotely. I really had to advocate to make that happen, though. It wasn't as easy as, oh, we do it remotely. It was a little bit of a hassle, but before my injury, I was studying to be a certified veterinary technician, and I had a 5-week internship left until I had my degree, and they pretty much refused me to continue it ultimately and discriminated against me now that I know my rights now, because you don't get disabled to know your rights. And so it was something I learned. So, you know, I experienced college back in the years of 2004 to 2007, and now I'm experiencing, you know, college now in 2022. And this is now my second semester there, and yeah, doing 18 credits. I'm not involved in anything on because I'm not on campus. So 18 credits is my whole life. And then I do these advocacy things and I hang out with my cats, and that's my life.
Awesome. Yeah, two very different experiences, right? And Angeline, I think you mentioned you were 21, right? And so did you go straight from high school into college? And then Barb, you coming back to school after many years. And so I'd love to hear about that process and how that process went for you both. You know, getting into school, finding what school you wanted to go to, what was right for you, and just like what your process was of getting into school.
Yeah, I can start. So for me, I actually started college able-bodied, or what I perceive to be able-bodied. Sorry, there's a fly flying around. But I applied to like 20 colleges, and I'm very low income. I come from like a pretty poor area, and I had to use like FAFSA and like a lot of scholarships to be able to go to college. And I'm also first generation, so no one else in my family has been to college. So my family didn't even finish high school. So I kind of just directly went and tried to apply as many as possible, and actually had to choose my cheapest option, which was RIT. And RIT is a tech school. I am a liberal arts major. I do 2 different liberal arts degrees, so it's very interesting. It's also, I think 70% men here or around there. So it's very like male centric. So that's been interesting to navigate as a femme person. And also, so a lot of my things were focused on trying to figure it out financially, just choose my cheapest option. I am also from Maine, so I wanted something out of state just because Maine isn't really accessible where I'm from. It's very rural. We had a town of like 1,000 people, so it was really hard to find something that was good for me. Not a lot of things were like paved roads or had wheelchair options or had like DME suppliers or that type of stuff. So after I did become disabled, I kept the decision to stay in Rochester just because there's a lot of DME suppliers. It's a pretty big disability population, just that type of stuff. So that's how I kind of chose where I wanted to be. And now that I am identified as disabled, I use a wheelchair full time, and I have a bunch of different diagnoses. I'm kind of struggling with trying to find like a grad school and looking at that type of thing as a wheelchair user. So that's definitely different, and that's definitely something that's opening my eyes a lot, especially because like online stuff would be so great for me, but there's so few programs that want to do online stuff. And it's the struggle of trying to like figure out how much accessibility I want to sacrifice by saying like, oh, I'll go to this campus or I'll go here, but it might not have help with this or have accessible housing or be affordable. So I guess for me, a lot of it is just accessibility and also affordability for a lot of what I've been looking at for college.
Did you, when you and I talked, before this, you mentioned a little bit about working with voc rehab too. Did that play a role in like staying at that school or anything like that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I started the vocational rehabilitation route earlier this year, actually. Now that I was able to like apply and get all my paperwork sorted, get all my diagnostic paperwork in. So they're helping me with things like books and that type of stuff. They're helping me with my new wheelchair so I can be able to do more things like campus independently. So it's a lot of independent living things. And they're also helping me with grad school type of things. So they'll be able to help me more with like grad school tuition than undergrad tuition, because they have me down as like, what is my dream job? Being a disability advocate. And that's kind of an unconventional career path for a lot of people. So that's kind of where they're coming at with an angle for me.
Right. How about you, Barb? What's been your journey and process into school? You mentioned a little bit already, but
yeah. So I actually was at the New York Metro Abilities Expo In 2019, I was helping to manage the Miss Wheelchair America booth. And I ended up, rolling around to the different vendors, and the disability studies professor was manning the William Patterson University table that was there, and she kind of flagged me down because she saw like my sash I was wearing, and she just asked about the program and whatnot. And so I told her about it, and she was like, you should go back to school. Like, or she asked me first if I was like what my degree was in, and I was like, I don't have one. So then she was like, what? She's like, you should go back to school. I was like, yeah, no, not for me. Mm-mm. And she was like, well, here, take this paper, think about it, I'm like, okay. So I put it in like the tote that they give you at the Abilities Expo, and just like forgot about it. It was during the pandemic. I was doing some cleaning, and I found it, and something in my gut just was like, you should do this. And I looked down, and I'm like, huh. And I'm like, you know what? Why don't I do this? Like, why don't I? I really should, because I could have more opportunities if I do this. So I'm like, well, you know what? I know like OVR here in Pennsylvania, it's called Office of Vocational Rehabilitation, has a wait list that's like a year plus long. So why don't I call up OVR, get the process going? Because, it's going to take a while anyway. So I called OVR up and was like, hey, I want to do this. And so I met up with the counselor that would be assigned to me, and we started the process. Like I said, at the time there was a wait list. Now there's not in Pennsylvania, but at the time there was. And I sat on that wait list for almost a year until he said that we were good to go. And at that point, I was like, all right. So I had to apply to college. I had to do all that stuff, get my transcripts from my previous schools, get them over there. And that was when I started the process of them starting to tell me that they're not going to take all these credits because they're 15 plus years old. Algebra hasn't changed. A lot of these things don't change. And so at that point, they accepted me, and it was like a whole process of, arguing with them essentially to take credits. And here's the thing that I think a lot of people don't like necessarily understand. Like if you sign like, yeah, I'm going to go to your school, and then you ask them to take credits, like they're less likely to take it because they already got you. So I didn't like commit to anything until they told me I'm going to take these credits. And so I kept fighting with them, and eventually, little by slowly, I got some more credits out of them, to the point that I was about like, they gave me about a year and almost a half of, worth of credits. And I'm like, okay, like that's something. It's not worth my 3 years I have, but it's better than the original thing they told me. So I just kind of was like, all right, let's keep moving then. And so that was kind of, that helped with funding. So if you're going back to school and you already did all this and you don't fight for them to do that, you're wasting time and you're wasting money. And so that was something I was like, I'm not wasting time and money, because in Pennsylvania, they kind of pay for per semester, So if I can have less semesters, then that's going to take me into them paying for my graduate school potentially, and the full thing. So why am I going to, if I already did it, why am I going to do it again? And so I got that to happen, and I put up a fight. I continued to advocate because a lot of the courses, like for instance, one of the disability studies courses was like, students will shadow the runnings of a disability nonprofit, something to that effect. And I was like, I run 2 disability nonprofits. Like, I'm not shadowing someone to do something, pay them to do something I do for free anyways. Like, no. And so I advocated for that, and they allowed me to do something called a portfolio submission. And so you pretty much write out a portfolio to say how you gain these learning outcomes. And so I had to do that, show proof of everything. So I did that throughout the summer with a couple courses, and that got me some more credits, and that saved me some more money. And I ended up essentially getting like 2.5 years till it was all said and done, covered. And so that was pretty awesome. And that was less than OVR had to pay. OVR also, how my college operates, it's not based on credit. They don't bill based on credits. They bill like for a whole semester. So I took like more than the 12 credits. I took 15, 18, credits per semester to get more in as well. And so that's kind of what, and the first semester OVR didn't have as much funding, so they paid for my tuition, and they pay like a small amount for books and whatnot. And then this semester, they're actually able to pay more because the funding whatnot increased. So that was also pretty awesome that this semester they're willing to pay more. So it really depends on funding sources of what they have at the time.
Yeah, and I just want to, in case someone who is watching this is not familiar with vocational rehab, it is like a program available in every state. And like you said, funding is different for every state, but essentially they are able to help people with disabilities get back to work. That's the goal, right? To get people back to work. And so to be able to do that, they will help fund you your tuition for school, books, sometimes housing, sometimes like a wheelchair, like Angie, like needing one for campus, or other types of equipments that you can justify that you need to be able to be successful in school and then eventually in employment.
It's also important that people know with vocational rehabilitation that things don't happen overnight. So like, don't call them and be like, hey, I want you to pay for school, but I want to start like next month. Like they are known historically in pretty much every state to take a very long time. And so that's something I also want to put out there, is just make sure, like, if they're an amazing resource, they do so much, they're incredible, but make sure that you are giving them enough time to do what they got to do. So
yeah, and another thing too is that like I had some pretty good caseworkers, but I have heard of people not having such good caseworkers, and it is your right to request a different one. So
yep.
If things are not going well with the one you have, you can definitely request to be changed.
Yeah, some caseworkers don't care as much as others, so it's definitely 100% get a new caseworker if you're not happy.
It's also hard because, like, in my experience, my caseworker, she's able-bodied, so it's really hard like conveying like, hey, I need this thing, or hey, this is exactly what I need on my wheelchair. So to be able to do things like, I have an elevation feature, which adds like tens of thousands of dollars onto my wheelchair. And I'm just like, this will help me reach things. And she's like, does it? I have to explain what it's like to be a wheelchair user and what it's like to be disabled. So it can be a little bit frustrating as well, like justifying what you need to able-bodied people, which also ties into like accommodations and a lot of different things as well.
Yeah. And I want to go back really quickly. I do want to get into accommodations and advocating for yourself, but I want to go back and just like recognize that both of you mentioned something really interesting, that you sort of created these paths for yourself. And when like Angie, you said, you kind of created your own degree, and Barb, when they didn't have the class, or they wanted you to take that class, but you already had the experience and you were able to, justify that and get credit for it. And I think a lot of people don't think about that you can actually, you don't have to follow the rules. I guess you can advocate for yourself in the sense that like, this might be a better path for you, or this might get you to where you need in a different way. I did something similar. I went to school for theater, and I had to take a directing class, but I did not want to spend another semester because it was the last class I needed. And I was able to like direct a community play and get credit for that. So I mentioned this because I think it's really cool that you both did that. And I think that, you know, sometimes it's thinking outside the box of like how you can get your credits or your experience to be able to get where you need to be.
And also just speaking up, like it does not hurt to ask questions. You know, I would have never have known I could do that if I didn't ask a question and ask several questions. You know, it does not hurt. Like the worst thing that she was going to tell me was, no, you have to do it anyways. Like, but what I got told ended up becoming better than what I was even hoping for. So it was like, oh, okay. You know, so it doesn't hurt to just ask all the questions.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, let's get into that then. You know, you asked a question, you asked for an accommodation, or you advocate for yourself. Can you guys, can you both sort of share some of your experiences when requesting accommodations, or if you needed some technology for support, or even if some of those accommodations were barriers too. Sometimes they're there, but they can be barriers as well. So I'd love to hear your experiences with that.
Yeah. So if Barb doesn't mind, I'll start. So at my college, since I started able-bodied, I didn't really get an orientation or really like start off here with resources in place. So I kind of had to navigate my resources. So first night school requires a diagnosis before you can get accommodations. So I had to go through all of that. And then I kind of like looked around and realized like, I don't know anyone like that's disabled really off the top of my mind that it's in my community. I didn't know anyone before I came to RIT. So everything was very new to me. I didn't really know any wheelchair users and I was very stuck. So like the first thing that came to my mind was like, all right, gotta find some wheelchair users, gotta find some community. And I was like searching social media, searching things like RIT wheelchair users, trying to find something. And I found one. Her name is Madison. I think she was out here like last month or something. And she was like an amazing help and helped me find a lot of resources. And honestly, I definitely wouldn't be here without her in so many different ways. And she kind of helped me navigate a lot of the new things, and also kind of helped you realize that a lot of things weren't accessible at my campus. Like when I started at RIT, we didn't have a disabled head of disability services. We had an able-bodied person. So that person really didn't know what to do here. There wasn't really a lot of things in place. And there was a lot of ableism, not only from students, but also from staff and faculty. So I really had to kind of like figure it all out myself, which is terrifying. And I had just started using like a stock hospital wheelchair. If anyone's ever used one of those, they know that they're impossible to use. One that's not custom, I was waiting for a custom tie light. So navigating bricks and hills and campus in a horribly non-fitting wheelchair was not fun. And I had to figure out what accommodations I would need. And I slowly started figuring out like, okay, maybe a note taker would be helpful. Maybe this. So I kind of started slowly adding accommodations. But a lot of the things that I needed didn't really exist yet. So things like, I lived on the 7th floor of a residence hall. What happens if there's a fire drill? I am a wheelchair user. There's a sign, big bold letters, do not use the elevator if there's a fire drill. What was I going to do? No one talked to me about it. No one told me what to do. What am I supposed to do since I live in Rochester, New York? It snows a ton. What am I supposed to do in the snow when it's an 8 a.m. class? It's 7 a.m. I'm outside and all the ramps are covered in ice and snow. What am I supposed to do with everything? And I had no idea what to do. But I am a very loud, very opinionated, very passionate person, and those are my founding principles. So I started immediately like, okay, I'm going to become the loud person who's going to get a job as a committee chair and start yelling at people to fix things. I'm going to join student government and orientation and start from the ground up to try to get people to listen to me. I made an Instagram that I just started taking pictures of every access barrier I came across, put it up on Instagram, got a couple hundred followers, and was like, hey guys, look at this. This is what life is like as a wheelchair user on this campus. And immediately things started fixing themselves miraculously. A lot of it has just been figuring things out myself. And I feel like that's something a lot of people have to do, unfortunately, especially if like your campus doesn't have like a big history of disabled people or wheelchair users or people who really have ever thought about that type of stuff. So definitely for me, it's been figuring things out myself and hoping for the best.
And you said there was not a disability center or anything like that.
There was a disability services office, but the director was able-bodied.
Oh, right. Okay.
So, and she said a lot of ableist stuff in the past, but now thankfully we have a wonderful disability services director who is disabled and has been a great help. But starting as like a freshman in 2019, which is pre-pandemic, it was very hard. And then the pandemic worsened everything, but it made it also more accessible for me because I could do it via Zoom and not really worry about like physical campus access barriers for a while. But now we're in 2022 and the accessibility that COVID kind of got us somehow is going away. So I'm rediscovering a lot of access barriers again.
Yeah. What about you, Barb? Yours is entirely remote, correct? And like, what has that experience been getting accommodations?
So as I said, it wasn't just handed to me to be remote. So the disability studies department chair, super amazing, very accommodating. She helped to advocate behind the scenes for me, I think, to some degree. But I think, when I originally emailed her to ask her about this program more in depth, she said every single class you need to graduate is available online. Okay. So when it came down to it, I was told by multiple people at admissions and stuff that the disability studies program wasn't remote, that they didn't offer that. And I was like, wait, what? And that ended up holding me up with OVR funding and whatnot. So I actually was supposed to start sooner than I did. It got pushed back a semester because of that. And so then finally we got that sorted out, that okay, all the disability studies courses are available online, but your gen ed courses that you need in order to graduate also are not available all online. And I'm like, you gotta be kidding me right now. So one of them was like a foreign language, and I took French back in high school, and I'm like, okay, I know vaguely some of the stuff. I don't remember it after 18 years, but I felt like I had more of a shot of being a little excelling at that potentially compared to starting a whole new language. And so that one was not available online. I was told repeatedly that it could not be online. And I was like, so wait a minute, you're meaning to tell me that when the pandemic hit, you guys were able to make accommodations for every able-bodied student overnight by opening up a Zoom screen. I was like, so why can't you do that for a disabled student? Like, have the teacher in class and just open up a computer camera and I can listen, watch, take notes. And so they were like, well, the teacher might not allow that, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, are you kidding me right now? I was like, this is absolutely ridiculous. And I do believe at that point I did threaten to potentially consult with a lawyer. And I was like, this is a reasonable accommodation. I'm literally telling you to log in to a Zoom page. That is it. That is the most reasonable accommodation that someone could make. And so finally they agreed to it. And then the professor who taught it also was agreeing to it apparently. So I was like, okay, cool. Got that figured out. And so I also have a hidden disability of dyslexia. So I needed accommodations with that. And so the disability, the Accessibility Resource Center at the college offers free membership to like a program called Read and Write that helps with reading things to you, or like when you're reading something and you don't know a word, like you can click on it, it tells you what it means, shows you pictures. Like it's a pretty awesome piece of technology. I also decided on my own to purchase another app called Speechify, because that Read and Write doesn't have like a PDF reader, but Speechify did. And so you can also take pictures of your textbooks and it'll read the pages as well, which is also very helpful. So for someone with dyslexia, it's a game changer. It's a complete game changer. So I also was able to advocate to get that accommodation as well. And whenever I started the whole process, like starting classes with, a foreign language professor, I met her and she was the sweetest person ever, willing to make the accommodation, understood completely the assignment that was given, and, was willing to meet with me after class if I had any questions, if I didn't see anything. Like she still is, I'm still in her class, but super accommodating, super like willing to go out of her way to help me, and still include me in class as well. Like, a big part of foreign language is speaking to one another, and she'll still call on me to speak things like I'm still there in class. So I'm very grateful that she understood, the situation. But those are the accommodations I got remotely. And again, it was a little bit of a fight to get.
I'm glad that you got them. And yeah, sometimes you have to do that little threat there to make things happen.
Yep, you do, sadly.
Well, you've talked about getting into school, your process, your classes, but there is a lot more to college as well. There's like, we've talked a little bit about clubs. There are some schools that I have like sororities and things like that, sometimes study abroad programs, or living in a dorm. Do either of you have experience or participated in any of these other college life things?
I was muted. Yeah, so I lived on a dorm and I've lived in on-campus housing since I started here because I'm out of state. So I lived in a 7-story inaccessible room my first year. And then the pandemic hit and I moved into accessible housing and there was like no one else in the building. So that was slightly terrifying. Thank you, COVID. And then for the last 2.5 years-ish, I've been living in an on-campus apartment. So it is fully accessible. So I have an accessible room with an automatic door, accessible bathroom, shower, laundry, kitchen, front door, like a lot of cool stuff. So that's been really cool. And I'm really grateful for that and like the accessible technology that I have in my apartment to kind of help me out, because it sucks not being able to reach things. It sucks not being able to cook and do a lot of independent things, especially since I don't have like a personal care assistant or anything. And I live with my fiance and also my 2 best friends. So that's really exciting. And I was able to like have that through my accommodations. That way I can kind of like get help when I need it. And also just live with people that I love and care about. As far as clubs, I've really been like making my own clubs for like disability advocacy. And I've also done a lot of stuff like student government, orientation, peer facilitating, like a lot of like the student leadership type of things. Even though like that was terrifying for me because I'm a very shy, anxious person, especially before my disability onset. But my disability and being a wheelchair user kind of strangely really forced me to like get my voice and be loud and more passionate than I was before. So that's kind of been my experience with that type of stuff. I don't do any sororities. And I haven't studied abroad yet, but I did do internship with MyUSA, which is Mobility International USA. And I've also done research on aquarium and zoo accessibility on campus, and also did a studio on campus for assistive technology. So I worked on wheelchairs and also accessible toys for autistic children. So kind of a lot of different extracurriculars from like a lot of different areas to kind of just like get out there, since I was really shy in high school and I really wanted to like break out of my shell in college. So I've done a lot of different random things.
That's great. And that's great that you've been, you know, like confident and been able to join clubs and even start clubs. And I love that you said that, you know, once after your onset of your disability, like that's given you your voice. That's powerful. That's awesome. How about you, Barb?
So yeah, I got invited to be part of like an honor society for like adults. I don't know the name of it. And so I just accepted that invite. Once it's, you know, these Greek, you know, wording, I don't know what they are. So I can't tell you off the top of my head. But I just accepted that. And that's about it. I don't know what's involved with it. I don't know anything else. And I haven't really, I mean, I live at home with my family. I don't, you know, I'm just, I do my, I mean, I'm 36 and you know, I guess I had somewhat of established life already whenever I, you know, and things I was involved in the community before I went to college. So that's kind of where I, you know, spend my time is, you know, I'm the chapter leader for the South Central Pennsylvania United Spinal chapter. So we still do peer mentoring with them. We do activities, you know, other things like that. So, you know, I think that's where most of my time is kind of spent.
Can you talk a little bit about going back to school after being away from school for a long time? Like, what was that? What kind of adjustments did you have to do, you know, as a student coming back, but also like as a person with a disability and just like with all these things already established in your life and your community?
It was hard. I guess I underestimated how much time it would take for my life. And so when I went back, I was still the president and state coordinator for Miss Wheelchair Pennsylvania. And I kind of took a background role while I was in school. And I realized like, I just can't do it. Like I cannot successfully put together a event, recruit girls, mentor girls. Like I just couldn't. And it wasn't really fair to them or any of the people that were volunteers helping me either. So I had to make the incredibly hard decision to step back from the organization this summer and step down from it and give that role over to the vice president, which I'm very grateful to her for continuing the organization that I helped to build from the ground up. And, you know, so that was something that I had to make an incredibly hard choice of something I am passionate about and loved and give that up so I could focus on myself because I just did not have the time logically. And, you know, it's in a day, you know, I spend a good 2-3 hours just being disabled in a day, you know, so we already have a part-time job of just surviving disabled. Now add to that like 18 credits and other things, like there's just not enough time in the day to do everything. And so, yeah, that was something that was really hard for me to come to terms with and do. But, you know, and my, you know, COVID changed the dynamic of my family as well. So I also get to, you know, in this free time I have, spend more time with my family as well. So that has also been important.
Great. Yeah. Well, just imagine once you're done graduating with school, you know, you both will have a lot of things to do and a lot of experience that, you know, I'm excited to see where you both will go after that. I wanted to leave some space for you to say, reflect on any, you know, any scary moments or like bad moments or really positive moments that you've had through school. And this could be anything, you know, whether it's like school related or like personal related, but that it impacted school.
Yeah, I can talk about probably one of the most defining, if not the most defining moment I had in college. It's not exactly like a positive one, so brace for that. But when I was an orientation supervisor, which is kind of a position where you train orientation leaders to help with the new students at my school, we had an off-campus retreat. And as anyone who's a wheelchair user knows, like those kind of words are scary. Like, okay, where are we going? Is it going to be accessible? Am I going to have transportation? Am I going to have a room? Am I going to have an accessible bathroom? So there was a lot of anxiety around it. So first off, it was a surprise location, so I couldn't prepare myself. Already terrifying. They didn't get transportation in time, so they asked me to find my own accessible transportation until they finally like conceded and got me accessible transportation, where everyone else, all the other people rode on a bus together and I was alone in a van with someone else. And then we got there and we had mandatory team building activities, which was swimming at the bottom of a hill, a grassy hill with no paths. And there was no adaptive equipment and there was no way for me to get down there. So my fiance, I had to bring him with me as like an assistant. He pushed me down because I had a tie light that didn't have handles. He held onto the back of my like wheelchair and helped me down the hill to kind of swim. So I still swam without any like adaptive equipment. And then there was whitewater kayaking down a even steeper hill with no adaptive equipment and no path. And then there was a bonfire, which I was scared of damaging my $14,000 wheelchair, so I couldn't participate. So I sat in like the little common room and I sat in my bedroom watching, I think, like a Disney movie with my fiance. And it was really alienating and it was really frustrating. And I wasn't able to do any of the activities with other people. And it was also mandatory stuff. So also led to me getting fired from my job on my birthday. And getting fired, my first time getting fired, hopefully my last time getting fired from a job. And on my birthday, 20th birthday. And I had just written all their accessibility training without compensation. I had trained them all on what to do. And they had known I was a wheelchair user for over a year before, because I had worked with them before I got this promotion. And it was heartbreaking because I knew this was discrimination. I knew they couldn't do that. So I went through my college's like ethics and compliance board, ombuds office, all this different stuff. And they investigated themselves and found they did nothing wrong. Probably like what you would expect to happen. And I felt super powerless. I felt super down in the dumps because it opened like a very scary world in my eyes of discrimination and all the things that could happen in my future with jobs. It made me feel that like people weren't going to support me after I got fired and no one really had my back. And it was just like a really dark time for me. And it definitely took me a long time to get over, and I'm still not over it. But it definitely empowered me to try to get a lot of things changed and try to get like mandatory training for these people so they know not to do these types of things without consulting like accessibility and the disability students office and all this type of thing. It's emotional for me to talk about, but it's probably like been the hardest part of my college experience so far. There's a nap following me, but yeah.
I'm sorry that you had to go through that. That's really frustrating and definitely disheartening, especially, you know, with all the work and effort that you put into it and like not feeling seen, or even considered. That's awful. Thank you for sharing.
That's definitely wild, Angie. Like, that's all wild. But welcome to the disability community, I suppose. Like, it's sad that that kind of stuff keeps happening to everyone. So I don't know, like, I guess because I'm only in my second semester, I'm back. I kind of don't feel like I've really had that many things, like, I mean, like to that extreme, kind of go awry. I mean, I think just learning how to manage my time in a different way, and learning to, I guess just study and go back to school, like, and understand tests and learn how to write papers again, which was, thank goodness for YouTube. Like, I don't remember formats, and like now there's like 16 different formats, and where do I find things? Like back when I was in school, like you couldn't use online sources because they were deemed like not like real and not right. So like now that's all there is. So like it was dealing with this world before the internet of going to college, and now dealing with everything virtually and going to college. I think that was one of the things that I really struggled with. And just all these things they made me do, like they had to have my childhood vaccine record. Okay, first off, I'm not even going to be on your campus, but I get that they don't get that. So like, okay, my childhood doctor is no longer in practice, and no one could track down these records for anything. So I dare anyone who's like almost, their late 30s, 40s to try and track down your childhood vaccine records. Like, it is something that was probably near impossible to accomplish, but I couldn't start until I had all these vaccine records. The meningitis vaccine, I remember taking that because I lived on campus when I was 18, and I had to do that to live on campus. And again, like I knew the month I did it, everything, the facility, and they're like, oh yeah, we don't have our paper records anymore. Excuse me? Like, so I think that was the thing I struggled with going back, was like the paper non-internet world to now everything digital, and like that translation wasn't connecting. So I think that was where my struggle ultimately came in at, was just learning all this stuff.
Yeah, and sometimes it feels like there's just so many things that need to happen before you can actually start school or take a class, all these extra things.
It was the things that they made me do. I'm just like, this is so crazy right now. Like I just could, even this semester was like, oh my gosh, like they wanted me. So here was something also, I think people should know this too, because I feel like a lot of young people probably don't necessarily look at their bills in depth, but because OVR is, helping me, they're getting like the readout of everything. And we know like how much it's costing. And then all of a sudden there's this added cost, and we're like, where's this added cost come from? So the college just automatically enrolls you in their health insurance plan. That I didn't ask to be part of, and they are charging you thousands of dollars a semester just to be enrolled in this insurance program, because every student has to have insurance, which I understand for liability reasons. But the thing is a lot of people probably already have insurance and they're being billed for it and not knowing it. So for me to not be billed for that, I had to go and submit a waiver to prove to them that my insurance was comparable to theirs. And then they had to go before a board to be approved to, and I'm like, are you kidding me? So every semester I have to submit this waiver, so I'm not charged thousands of dollars for a health plan that I can't use out of state anyway. So that's something I think a lot of people like probably don't go and look at, these weird things they're charging you for. I also got randomly charged for a food plan, which I didn't even enroll in either. They just automatically enrolled me in like a $10,000 food plan. And I'm like, no. So
good tips to give students, like check your bills. So
exactly, like do the detailed look down and see, are these comparable? Like, is there a reason for these charges? And it's okay to call and ask questions again, like that. Just ask questions.
We have Emily back. I think we have some questions for you. I will let Emily ask the questions.
So we actually have one specifically for each one of you. So So this one says, Angie, my question for you is, how have your clubs gone? Have you had a lot of members join? Oh, you're muted.
Thank you for catching that. So yeah, officially, I think yesterday we became a club, so that's super exciting. It was a long time coming. And I think we have like 80 something members so far. And on like my access.ret Instagram, where I document access fairs, I hit like 501 followers today. So props to me. I think that's the most following I've had on anything. So it's very exciting. And I think a lot of people were just like, finally, yay, we have something for disabled people that we can talk to and vent and have that sense of community. Because one thing I love about the disabled community is we're very much a community. We have a lot of mutual aid and interdependence and shared resources. So I think it's been very wonderful for that. And I'm super grateful. And I have a lot of hope and faith for how it will grow in the future.
And then Barb, this question is, how long did it take OBR to fund your college? So maybe you can talk a little bit about those.
Yeah, like I said, in the state of Pennsylvania, this was around the time of the pandemic, and just because I was knowledgeable about it from advocacy, like meetings and stuff, I knew that there was a wait list. And at the time, they were predicting the wait list was like a year and a half. I was on it for a year. So I started with them, in 2020, the beginning of 2020, and I started college at the like in January 2022. So about 2 years of, figuring everything out.
Yeah, and like for me, I got VR right away. Like there was no wait list in my state. Like it's very much dependent on your state. And I think like for me, for my state, it ranks on disability. So how severe your disability is where you get put on like the wait list. So based off of my disability, the severity, and how many people are waiting, like I had no wait, but it can definitely depend. It's very different from state to state and person to person.
Yeah, ours was also depending upon severity of disability, but there were advocates, advocating about that, because it really wasn't truly about severity as much as it just was about collecting however many diagnoses, because I'm like, okay, you're saying that someone who's completely blind, is at the bottom of the list. Like it just didn't. So people were advocating and, talking about that. But I also see in the question that she also asked about dyslexic stuff. And you're very welcome for those resources. But another thing I wanted to add is there's also a font called Dyslexie that you can download, and it makes it so much easier to read. It is such an amazing font. I was like, oh, this isn't real. And when I read, I was like, oh my gosh. So something as simple as changing the font is something that might help your daughter as well. And I'm part of the South Central Pennsylvania chapter of United Spinal.
Thank you so much, ladies. It's almost 7, well, Central Time. We're gonna wrap it up. So thank you so much for coming. We wanted to let everybody know that our webinar series is coming to an end soon. So our last 2 webinars will be hosted on October 12th and November 9th. We hope that you can join us. And we really appreciate you taking those few minutes to fill out the survey. A recording of this webinar will be available on our YouTube channel. And thank you so much for coming, and a big thank you to Angie and Barb for being our guests tonight. I hope everybody has a wonderful week.
Thank you, Angie, and thank you, Barb, for chatting with us tonight.
Thank you.